I say hello everybody like I normally do, I just wanted to answer the big question. I had issues with my recordings, okay? I just keep having the same issue uploading these videos. They just aren't letting me sometimes. Sometimes my videos have to be somewhere in a short length, so they can upload. If they're too long, then no, I can't let you upload this. You don't have enough on your phone. I really think I should get a new phone. Anyway, hello everybody, and welcome to this next video. Today, I'm going to be discussing another comedy-related subject. Just seems to be in my thing right now. I talked about my favorite comedy movies of certain decades. I was going to do my favorite comedies of the 70s, but that list never really got off the ground, so I don't think I can do that. Anyway, we're going to be looking at actors. I've already talked about who my favorite actors are, and that hasn't really changed much. But what about in the world of humor, the world of cinematic comedy? Should I be focusing on that? No? Well, I'm going to anyway. My top 5 favorite comedy actors. Now, here's the thing. Top 5 because I really couldn't make a top 10. It was hard. So they're just doing 5. I am going to include honorable mentions, so that should be good. Also, these are only referring to the actors in the terms of their success in the comedy movies. So I'm not going to be focusing on their humor during stand-up or anything else other than film. So just to keep that in mind. I'm only focusing on how funny actors can get in a movie, not a show or anything else like that. And it's only actors because I really don't know if there's that many good there's that many good actresses who make me laugh as much. Don't want to be sexist, I'm just saying I can only really think of actors that are funny. There weren't too many actresses in my mind that I consider to be as funny, so these are just my top 5 favorite comedy actors in cinema history. Basically just, stuff I consider funny based on who's I find to be the funniest in their roles, just who makes for a great sense of humor to my type. Let's look. Mike Myers. So, how do I know Mike Myers? How shouldn't I? Mike Myers is a Canadian comedy actor who started off in Saturday Night Live, which is a nice fun TV show. Saturday Night Live went on for a while and is still going on. It's a fun little comedy show just that shows off a bunch of funny skits of different comedian stars doing weird stuff. You should know what it is. And thus, Mike Myers was one of the few who made their way through the peak of cinema from their greatness on SNL. Mike Myers is a good example. He's had some funny roles. The best I can remember him for is obviously with his peak and stuff like Wayne's World. It was an SNL skit that turned into a movie, a pretty funny one. He also had, of course, the Austin Powers movies, which definitely helped. And then there's Shrek. Come on, everyone knows Shrek. It's becoming more relevant now than ever. But yes, what makes Mike Myers funny? Probably the best thing I can get from Mike Myers that makes him such a funny actor is the way he's able to just come up with the most British Scottish accent ever. That's one example. He used it for a couple times, like when he had that one role in So I Married an Axe Murderer, if anybody knows that movie. There was, of course, his role in Shrek, playing Shrek, repeating every voice he had during the role and just making him sound Scottish. And he even had that role in Austin Powers, playing that fat bastard guy. It's funny. His ability to just turn himself into anything ever just makes him a great actor. It's what makes most of these actors great. Their ability to transform into a completely different looking person, yet still with the same level of humor. Like Dr. Evil, for example. Dr. Evil looks way different than Mike Myers' Austin Powers character, which just makes it more funny. Seeing him transform himself into other roles, but still bringing in a little random accent he can think of. Or maybe it's the ability to laugh at his own joke, yet then realize what he's saying is probably not something that came out right in that cake. But that's what makes it funny, because we know that Myers is trying his best and is doing a great job, because we still laugh at it if it's cringy or if it is funny, he just doesn't realize it. And while Myers has had his fair share of not so funny movies, the movies where he was funny really did do something nice. So I appreciate Mike Myers for all the fun humor he brought us in all the movies that were indeed funny. Will Ferrell. Another famous star that got his peak on SNL, Will Ferrell has had a good share of great movies. The comedy he gives us are lots of fun. He's appeared in a lot more funny movies than Myers has. He's been in stuff like Elf, Step Brothers, Anchorman, Talladega Nights, The Other Guys, just so on and so forth. And yes, Ferrell does have a peak of comedy too. What Will Ferrell does that makes him the funniest are a couple things. One is a sense of being childish. That's the kind of role he seems to love having in his movies. Like, take Step Brothers, for example. He plays a 30-year-old who still lives with his parent and acts like a child when he has to deal with his brother, who he does not like, and even when he does like, he acts as crazy as ever. And it makes for the funniest. He does that in some other movies, like when he plays Elf. Elf, who goes to the real world because he's actually human, but he's more used to being a Christmas character. So a Christmas character in a world like New York, say, is definitely sounds as funny as it is. Or maybe it's the fact that he does a lot of fun in his yelling. Yeah, I know it's a weird thing to focus on, but Will Ferrell yells in most of his movies, and the way he yells is honestly lots of fun to me. Like take Anchorman, for example. He plays a weird character who seems to really have random times of screaming. He randomly chooses to scream at any random moment. That's kind of what makes the screaming funny. You never know when he's going to do it. Sometimes he doesn't have to scream, but he just does. Honestly, it's lots of fun to watch. Just seeing the man get all frustrated or just be downright unaware of what he is. It's what makes for some of his funny films. As well as, of course, SNL sketches. I did say I wasn't going to talk about any of their sitcom on TV, but since this guy got his start on Saturday Night Live, I think we should all owe him praise for that, because the roles he played on that show are lots of fun, too. He got his own SNL movie as well, and I had the Roxbury. It's a little skit of him and some other guy, I forgot the actor's name. As they're just a bunch of peak men who always enjoy going to strip clubs or whatever. That got his own movie for some reason, and it may not have been as funny as Wayne's World, but Will Ferrell's a funny actor, so I give it credit. This guy has done a lot of good stuff. Bill Murray. And yet, another guy from SNL. Bill Murray is everything else for me. His comedy comes from a lot of fun stuff. We all, of course, remember him for roles like Ghostbusters, or Stripes, or Caddyshack, or I can't think of him on top of my head. What about Bob? Does anybody know that movie? He's had some good films. Bill Murray's funniest stuff is how he can act away from the seriousness that he's in. What's funny is seeing Bill Murray be in a role where he either doesn't care where he is and what situations he's in, or when he cares too much and just does not know when to stop at something. Like take Ghostbusters, for example. What makes Ghostbusters one of my favorite movies of all time is how it takes some funny guys and actually puts them in serious situations, but doesn't take away too much from how funny they are. So when Bill Murray's in Ghostbusters, most of the time when he's in a situation that sounds so serious where you would probably scream or something, Bill Murray just acts in his own calm voice and stuff. Like say during the final battle with the Stay Puft guy, he doesn't scream or anything, he just actually acts so calm and still able to make some fun little punk one-liners. That's just what makes it so much fun to watch, just seeing all the crazy stuff happen with these guys. There's other moments where he acts too much like himself. He enjoys himself too much. Like Caddyshack, a role of where he plays a guy who just wants to kill a gopher at a golf course. And that's his whole goal throughout the movie. He enjoys himself too much, does so many things that, while he may think are normal, everyone around him is just annoyed by it. Yeah, that's just something that's interesting about these actors. Being able to do their own things without worrying about how other people think of him. They just know when to be funny. They don't have to laugh at themselves or anything. You know? I don't know if I would do a good job being a funny guy if every time I do something funny I laugh at myself. That would just be terrible. I don't know. I'll have to see if I can do that. Well, if I can't, I'll always look at Bill Murray and think how great he was. If I could do it, I will know that even though I am a good comedian, I'm not as good as this guy. Or anyone else on this list. Like Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey didn't get a start on SNL. He had some roles on SNL, but what made his big peak was on the other TV series called In Living Color. It was also a sketch show. It was not as popular, but it did have a lot of good popularity at its time. It featured fun skits, with most of them featuring Jim Carrey. Even in the 80s, Jim Carrey appeared in some rare B-teen movies, but not a lot of them were memorable, and didn't really give him the performance that we all would have expected from him. He didn't do too much in those. It wasn't until 1990, when In Living Color came out, we saw Jim Carrey for who he really was. And after that, he got roles. Lots of good roles.
We know him now as the man in the mask, the man who's Ace Ventura, Liar Liar, Dumb and Dumber. I actually, to be honest, Dumb and Dumber was not that good in my opinion. Jim Carrey has done a lot of funny stuff. Honestly, this man is like walking cartoon. You can see that a lot. The best things he can do is move in fast pace, say stuff in a weird way, or just overall act like he is completely insane. Everyone around him has to try their best not to burst out laughing when filming with him. So I gotta think Jim Carrey's gotta be a hard guy to work with. Because every time you're filming stuff with him, you need to keep a straight face. You need to be in the tone. You don't want to burst out laughing when you have this guy walking around. He'll just take every role he is given and perfect it in so much. Even if it's not something intentional. The way Jim Carrey acts still makes the role work either way. Like say when he played the Riddler in Batman Forever. A role you wouldn't see Jim Carrey do, but since he did do it, you can't really think of much else. I mean, there was Paul Dano, who I honestly like better in the role. But when Jim Carrey put the suit on, you still like the character, because come on, it's Jim Carrey. He'll still make the character enjoyable. Or like with the Grinch, when he portrayed the good old Grinch character. You would think that's a role that wasn't made for him, but when you see it, you just will always consider it to be the best for the character. Jim Carrey has been always chosen around the 90s and 2000s. Every comedy movie wanted him. And I can see why. He really is a fun legend. I've seen a lot of his work and proved to see more. And I honestly think Jim Carrey should have been number one on this list. Why isn't he though? Who could possibly be better than him? Might surprise you, but there is one person out there I think seem to find to be even funnier than someone like Jim Carrey. Before that, however, here are some honorable mentions. Let's go over them each. Eddie Murphy. If this was a top 6, I think Eddie Murphy would make the cut. Eddie Murphy is a funny guy. He's definitely proven so much. He, of course, also was on SNL, and then he peaked in stuff like Beverly Hills Cop, Trading Places, Coming to America, Shrek, and all that between. So yeah, Eddie Murphy deserved the top 6. Mel Brooks. He could have made the list also. There is one reason he didn't. I seem to find him more of a director than an actual actor. He's acted hilarious, but his directing skills seem to impress me more. Because ironically, his best movie, Young Frankenstein, he wasn't in. He actually didn't have a role in that movie, even though I consider it to be his funniest. Might be sad, but I like Mel Brooks. He's a funny director more, a writer. His acting is great, but his directing and writing is much more to his character. John Candy. John Candy would have definitely made it if it was a top 7, so there's that. Jonah Hill. Jonah Hill is probably best known for being one of the most potty-mouthed out of any other actor. And honestly, I think that does make for some of his funny movies. However, I do admit, I might eventually get old of his crazy talk. I don't know. I like the way Jonah Hill is, but since he swears too much, I feel like that's the only reason we find him funny, because of his swearing. And swearing isn't something that's always going to stay funny when you see it over and over. I still laugh at Jonah Hill, and I still expect to see more from him. Just, top 8, okay? And all of the 6 down here are the Monty Python crew. That's right, Terry Gilliam, Terry Jones, Eric Idle, John Cleese, Michael Palin, and Graham Chatton. All of them are part of the crew. While not all of them are alive right now, they all have made for some of the funniest of Monty Python ever. Because we all know who Monty Python is. If you don't, I'm sorry. They made stuff like Life of Brian, or the funniest movie of all time, Monty Python and the Holy Grail. The reason they weren't on the list, I couldn't think which one to go with. I was going to go with John Cleese, but I just can't leave any of them out. They're all part of one big group. So if this were funniest comedy groups, they would be number 1. But no, it's just on separate actors. And unfortunately, I couldn't decide which one, so they're all just going to be honorable mentions. Because I love them. They're probably the number 1 funniest in all ways. Because Monty Python is definitely the funniest movie ever, The Holy Grail. But what is number 1? What actor do I find to be the funniest out of them all? His name is Leslie Nielsen. Don't know who that is? I apologize. Leslie Nielsen is an actor who started out in serious roles. Around the 50s and 60s and so on. He was in roles that were made in a serious approach. He played a big guy who could win an Oscar, but I actually don't know if he did or not. So, at the time, you could argue Leslie Nielsen works as one of the finest actors out there, although he didn't, because at the time Leslie Nielsen wasn't as popular. He was used a lot and did get some praise, just not enough. But then in 1980, he was casted in a movie called Airplane, and the role he was given was the role that made him big and successful. And thus he became into the peak of comedy. Because after Airplane, he did Police Squad. After Police Squad, he did The Naked Gun, which is an adaptation of Police Squad. After that, he just did any comedy movie that casted him. While he was mostly just a choose type, the reason Leslie Nielsen is the funniest out of anyone on this list is for one big reason. He's too serious about it. Since he started off in serious roles, whenever he's in a comedy movie, he acts as serious as ever. Unlike everyone else on this list who does something crazy to make themselves funny, all Leslie Nielsen does to make me laugh is just say anything out of nowhere. And saying stuff, or no, maybe doing stuff that just comes out of nowhere without it all being loud or obnoxious to it, probably makes for some of the funniest comedy out there to me. And that's what made Leslie Nielsen such an icon. His ability to do or say anything hilarious and out of nowhere without making it sound so obvious. You catch it in your own eyes. And when you catch it, you will always laugh at it. What makes it so great is that it's one that can have the hardest time getting old. Something like that could probably never, ever die. All that humor will always remain funny. And even though all the other stuff these other actors do are great, I won't lie, there might be a small chance I'll get tired of it. I probably will not, I shouldn't. But even if I do, I'll have Leslie Nielsen to look back at. Because everything he did will always remain timeless. Just because of how straightforward it is. It doesn't replace too much. It doesn't take away from the story. Well, actually, sometimes it does. But he doesn't change his tone. He doesn't act in a more weird way. He doesn't just completely turn into something else. He just acts normal, like he's in a normal situation. Just reads through everything without at all chuckling or being loud. He says everything in a way you have to catch it yourself. It won't wake you up. It'll keep you on the floor when you hear it or see it. So he passed away in 2009 because he was getting old. But when he did have comedy, he had comedy. And even if a majority of his movies haven't been too great, he was the best part in every single one of them. And in all honesty, the way Leslie Nielsen does his humor makes him, in my opinion, the funniest actor I've ever seen in cinema history. What about in history overall, not just cinema? I can't say who is. All I can say is in the world of cinema, Leslie Nielsen is my favorite in comedy ever. It might sound crazy, but I will always stand behind that point. Fun fact, I was going to have a list of my top 10 favorite comedy movies of the 70s, but that list never made it. I was going to upload it last weekend, but it wouldn't let me. I tried uploading this weekend, it wouldn't let me, so I just had to do this. I'm sorry. But Monty Python and the Holy Grail, which came out in 1975, is my favorite comedy of the 70s. My favorite comedy of all time, so I might as well just say that. If you want to see me do the list, I'll try, but right now I'll just go with this. Alright, these are my favorites in comedy actors, so acting is good. That works well.